Hello and welcome to A Taylor's Tales. This is Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and today we're talking with one of my mentors, closest friends, and allies amongst the many. It is Ollie Deacon. How are you doing, Ollie?
I'm really good, thanks, mate. Thank you very much for having me on.
It's great to hear from you. For bad reasons other than security, we can't show Ollie's image today due to anything that I'm not going to mention for now, but he is somewhere in the world that we can't record.
It's just shitty internet. That's all it is. It's not anything too bad.
It's just terrible. Can't even pick up an image. I love it. But
Yeah,
today we're talking about Lord of the Rings, mate. Something that we both hold dear to our hearts, and something that's extremely just changed the world for what it is. What's Lord of the Rings sort of like done for you, and how do you feel towards sort of the making of the movies, etc.?
Oh, mate, it's. I don't even think I could really describe it in any short amount of words. Obviously, it came out when I was very young. I say very young. I think I was 11 or 12 when it came out, and it was sort of the effect it had on me lasted for many years. Yeah, and you know, everything from watching it pretty much once a week for like 2 years in a row, to play fighting in the woods with my mates with sticks, you know, against the hordes of imaginary urukai and orcs and stuff like that.
I love it.
What about you? What was it?
You know, for me, Lord of the Rings was a bit of a special bonding between myself and my dad. It was the first ever film where myself and him, I was 7 years old, he decided that he wanted to basically introduce me to the world of film in a new way other than kids stuff. And he basically did the whole shebang. He ordered Pizza Hut, which was very popular at the time, and he got me sweets, etc. And we put it on the big screen downstairs in my living room, and we watched The Fellowship for the first time, and it was probably one of the most memorable events that's ever like sort of occurred in my childhood, where afterwards I wasn't the same person. And like you say, it's very hard to describe that feeling of just a change as a kid, from realising that the world of fantasy can open your mind and make you a more creative person.
Definitely. Yeah, it's almost like there was a life before Lord of the Rings, and then there was a life afterwards, and they are totally different.
It changed cinema, and I think it changed people.
Yeah, I hope so.
For the better,
obviously. Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But no, I remember we went to go see it at the cinema because my dad had read me and my brother The Hobbit when I was a lot younger. I think I was about 6 when he first read it, and I remember, you know, Bilbo Baggins and the Misty Mountains and things like that. And obviously, when you're that age, you don't really grasp it. But there was obviously the element of fantasy. And then when my dad saw it being advertised on TV, he said, "We're going to go to the cinema and see that because it's like." He said, "Do you remember The Hobbit?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, this is the next one. This is like the next story." And so we went from there.
I love that, mate. That's just, what is the coincidence that both our dads sort of like realised like this is going to be good for the kids. This is going to change them as people. I love it. But
yeah,
so I'm just going to like jump in and just say from the beginning of the film, we're introduced to like, you know, the three elves are presented with 3 rings of power, and the dwarfs, 7 dwarfs, 7 rings, and 9 to the rings of men. And I just was wondering if you're someone who sees a lot of sort of, when you look at mythology and you look at fantasy and you sort of see it into how it affects people and reality. What do you think you get from those sort of those rings of power to govern life?
Well, I've been thinking about that for a while actually, because I the last time I watched these films was back in January in my flat, and I watched it on my projector. You know, I had obviously you saw the projector, and I had the entire wall was taken up by, you know, these films, and I had my surround sound headset on, like what you've got on now.
Yes.
And it was a totally dark room, and so it was like
the perfect setup.
Perfect setup. There was nothing going on in the world apart from this film. And it's like, for me, mythology, I was sort of introduced by, what am I trying to say here? I was introduced to the mythological ideas that sort of underpin, what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to segue into, I'm not trying to segue into anything. I'm trying to get to where.
Don't worry about it. I know what you're trying to get at. You're trying to describe the link between the governing of men and the mythology behind the elves, and the dwarves.
Well, I'm taking a step even further back than that. I was introduced to what hopefully we're going to talk about. Yes. I was introduced to it by through Jordan Peterson, as yes. I'm sure most people who might listen to this would be.
Yes.
And from him, I started started looking into the ideas of Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell primarily. Those were the people that stuck with me the most, I think. Mm. And the way I describe it, the way I picture it, is that when you're watching this fantasy, you're taking part in a dream, and the dream is where, what Jordan Peterson said on one of his speeches, the dream is where fantasy comes from. It's where it's literature and arts and everything. That's where it all exists, and it's like the birthplace of fantasy.
I know exactly what you're trying to get at, and it's a story for which people uphold values as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to go even deeper than that. So what I'm trying to say is that the interpretation I have of these stories, because it's like a dream that I've taken part in, although it wasn't my dream, it didn't come from me, it came from obviously J.R.R. Tolkien and Peter Jackson. The effect I get from it is very unique, I think. I think I probably should have started with, I should have written some of these ideas down.
No, it's all right, mate. I know what you're trying to...
I'll just carry on. So, where was I? Carl Jung, the dream.
Hallucinogenic dream.
Well, definitely could be. It certainly is powerful enough. Certainly in the dark room with surround sound headset, you are literally in the film when in that setup. Yeah.
And the battle there as well. The battle is the first thing that you see. You're drawn into this battle between men, elves, and against the darkness that is the orcs, with Sauron in the background, and the visuals of an exploding volcano into this, you've got this dark sort of visualization alongside and voice.
you have the forces of good voluntarily going into where the danger is, aren't they? They're sort of going voluntarily into hell itself almost.
Yes.
Or at least a representation of hell itself, because obviously when Boromir describes it, it's like the very air you breathe is a poisonous fume, and obviously in a lot of Judeo-Christian ideas, there is like a smell of burning sulfur or fire and brimstone in hell. It's very powerful imagery.
I'd love to, because what you're describing here to me is almost part of Jordan Peterson's rule for diving into hell and diving into the underworld to be able to find oneself, or even to just battle the demon. Yeah, definitely, exactly. Definitely. And it's almost like that.
I had something there, but it just vanished completely. But you asked what I thought the rings might mean. What they might mean to me. I actually can't work out what they might mean in like an archetypal, symbolic sense. I think it might mean something along the lines of the ability or the desire to dominate other people, to rule over them. I know that Galadriel actually says that in the opening line. She says it's the will to dominate all life.
Yes.
But I think the ring, it's kind of like, because it looks nice, it's nice and shiny, it's pure, but it is tainted with total malevolence. It is it's a piece of Sauron himself.
Yeah, it's he put his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. Yes, exactly.
And so I suppose it's like if it's like a route to using those things to be in charge, I suppose. Although I say that, and it doesn't sound right, and I still haven't been able to work it out. And I've been thinking about this since last December. The closest I've got is what I just said, that it's the desire or the will or the ability to actually rule over people.
Yes.
But it's like the men who were given the 9 rings of power, they weren't strong enough to resist what was in their heart, which is the desire of power. Dwarves, in the books, they had really no interest in the rings, and they were kind of lost, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And the elves, they had the ability to hide the rings from Sauron, but I don't think they actually had the ability to rule over the rings entirely. I know it gave Galadriel some ability to help the woods of Lothlorien, sort of be a sanctuary for her people. But I suppose I think it's the one archetypal theme that I haven't really been able to pin down with any real certainty is what the rings actually represent. Because I think if I could work it out, then aside from the fact that the books and the film actually being about the ring, the rings themselves actually wouldn't be of any real value to the story if there was something else that could replace them.
Yes.
If that makes any sense. And it's kind of like a mystery, like I said, it's I can't actually work out the mythological symbolism of the ring because normally gold is something good, something positive in mythology, but in this case it's not.
It's a piece of Sauron. It's a piece of his soul.
It's a piece of the devil himself, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is this is something I didn't find out until much later down the line, is that the rings for the elves were not made by Sauron.
It's Celebrimbor. Well, Sauron didn't make his ring either, did he? It was Celebrimbor.
Celebrimbor didn't make the Ring of Power. Sauron did.
Okay.
But he did make the 9 rings, which is why the men were so easily swayed. It was because the 9 rings were made by Sauron himself, and the rest of the rings for the dwarves and the elves were made by Celebrimbor, which meant that Sauron didn't have control to, like, the ability to sway them as much as he was able to with men. But you're totally right, I think, in the sense that it's almost like they gave in, as in the inner darkness for these characters, absorbed them, and they became darkness itself. Yeah,
definitely. And they fell, and it's in mythological terms when they succumbed to their rings, they fell into the unconscious.
Yes.
Or they fell into the realm of the unconscious, and they weren't able to pull themselves out of it.
Yeah.
And the Dark Lord kept them there, and he made them do his bidding, effectively. So they're slaves to his will.
I can't wait for us to talk about one of the scenes, because that ties in so well, because ironically, and almost, Peter Jackson obviously did this deliberately, but in the shadow world, these beings, these Nazgul, are white and shining. So why are they white and shining within the shadow world, but they are black and cloaked in the real world? It's intriguing to see.
Yeah, it's very clever use of imagery as well. I think so. Normally, or archetypically speaking, I suppose white would be associated with consciousness, and would be associated with good, in like a heroic sense, in the good. And so obviously they're in the realm of the unconscious. They might be the heroes for all the other beings that are inside it. Obviously they're not. They're sort of pseudo kings now, aren't they? Because they're not. They have no power over any land or anything. But they have power over orcs. They have power over the minions of darkness, so to speak, from Mordor, and over Sauron's forces. And I suppose so. It's like they're these terrifying figures, and they're terrifying even for orcs as well. But there might be some reverence that the orcs look up to them with, and that's why they're white in the shadow world.
Yes.
If you take the shadow world to be the realm of the unconscious.
Yes, I do. I definitely do. I think more than that, that's why Frodo, when he turns sort of ghoulish in real life, he's starting to become part of that unconscious world. But that's in the later scenes.
Yeah, we can get to that, definitely.
Yeah, one of the things we'll get to that is that when we see men resisting against the darkness. And we see the battle, and we see, as I've described before, one of the things that really symbolised in sort of an archetypal thing is that Sauron's fall is his greatest strength, and his greatest strength is his greatest weakness. And it's so interesting that, I don't know if you spotted it, where Isildur takes up a small knife, this small sword that's shattered, and he cuts off the very thing that generates all of Sauron's power. So the ring that is a piece of him, but also the greatest weapon he has, is also his greatest downfall. And
it's similar, I suppose, to Voldemort pouring his soul into the Horcruxes, isn't it? It's like it's the maybe not with Voldemort because they weren't the greatest pieces of him, but like with Sauron, it certainly was his strongest features and personality, I suppose. But yeah, the Isildur picking up his father's sword after it's been broken. It's quite it's another very, very powerful image there, because it's, if you imagine, if you're in a battle against, even if you're in a battle against other people, other human beings, and they're armed with, pieces of metal, and they're trying to hack you to pieces, it would take some real courage to be there, firstly.
Oh yeah,
and obviously,
100%.
if you were asked by a king to go to war, you would have to really believe in that king. You'd have to really think, he is the man I would actually follow to my death. Like a Leonidas kind of character.
Yes.
Like the archetypal Spartan. Like he represents everything that you think a man should be, and he is doing what he's asking you to do. And so he's like the ultimate man. And obviously they're descended from the Númenórean kings as well. And they're Dunedain. So they are actually, physically powerful, and they're long-lived and so on and so forth. And then to see that king die, to be killed. So in a sense, that's almost like a god image that you have there.
Yes.
So you're looking, and you're physically standing next to a god in a sense.
Yes. So
and then
easily
to see him
aside. Yeah.
Exactly. To see him die at the hand of the devil himself, it'd be pretty disheartening.
Yes.
The Isildur, the son of the king, Simba, that's that sort of that sort of idea. He then takes on the mantle of the king, and he lives up to the ideal. And he's about to die, because if he hadn't have cut the ring off, he would have been, I don't know, probably torn to pieces by Sauron.
Yes.
But it would fill you with hope, wouldn't it? And it would fill you with a kind of religious awe. It'd be like a numinous experience to see someone actually being the man you think they are, or the man you think they should be.
Which is, again, fantastic little link to Aragorn, in the sense that we see in Isildur the greatness that he could have been, and that Aragorn would eventually be.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then obviously, I think maybe Isildur, because he didn't throw the ring into Mount Doom, I think what probably happened is that he was so enamored by his own victory that he confused himself with, the transcendent ideal, whatever that might be. And that would have been, I suppose that for him, that would have been his father.
Yes.
Because as far as I'm aware, I've never read any details about the people of Middle-earth having this kind of religion or anything like that, or, having a kind of...
there's not.
I know there's Eru.
There's the Valar, but that's about as good as it gets.
Okay. I've not heard of that.
They're written in the Silmarillion, but they're not like...
Silmarillion.
Yes, thank you. And the problem with that is that they're physical beings. So people see the gods. Like, they don't need to worship them, because technically speaking, Gandalf is a god. Like, he's one of the Maiar.
He's one of the history, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is one of those. And so I think that's why there's no religion within Middle-earth. It's that they can physically see the greatest demons, and they can see the physical greatest good.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't need one. You certainly wouldn't need like a codified religion, would you, I suppose?
No.
But then that does... I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think that in the Silmarillion, the first chapter is written in a very biblical-like sense. And it's a fantastic read, actually, because it starts... The first line is, "There was Eru, the One," and it's like, so this is the God character, creator of the heavens and earth. and he sits alone in the timeless halls, and then he, from himself, he creates the Ainur, and they exist for an untold amount of time, of eons, probably millennia.
Yeah.
And they just play music, and they're just sitting there, just jamming,
Enjoying the times.
Yeah, exactly. And just thinking like you're literally in the kingdom of heaven, and like what is there to do other than just enjoy it, you know?
Yeah.
And Tolkien was was a devout Catholic, and so he would have known the Judeo-Christian ethic, the Judeo-Christian mythology, in great detail. And obviously, in his own writing, he was trying to create his own kind of creation story. And obviously, in Judeo-Christian religion, God uses the spoken word as a tool of creation. So he speaks things into being. And in this reality, Eru uses music as a tool of creation. And so after the gods, him and the gods have been, you know, playing music for however many eons it was, he then says, stop, and I'm going to show you what you've created. And it's quite a beautiful idea, actually, because if you imagine, like, if you hear music, there is like a, Jordan Peterson talks about it as this delicate balance of order and chaos. And it's like when you listen to something that really hits it, you're almost experiencing reality itself from a point where you can't really describe it. It's like it's the perfect harmony, you know, of order and of creation and destruction. And that's how Arda is created, through music. And then obviously the gods then go out and they shape it, you know, they raise mountains up, and they bring caverns down, and they create rivers and the seas and so on and so forth, and they raise forests and all that sort of thing. And then eventually, after Aule brings the dwarves into being, and then Eru says, put them back, the elves are born, the elves come about. Yes. And obviously the first elves were, some of them were found by Melkor and twisted and tainted and so on and so forth, but some of them were found by the good guys. And they were taught about Eru, and they were taught about creation, and they were taught about their role in Earth and so on and so forth, and the fact that they're immortal, and, you know, this is what life is all about, I suppose. And it's almost like they have, because they're immortal, they don't really need to pass on that information to the younger generations for it to only then be forgotten 2 or 3 generations later. It's just going to stay forever because they're immortal. So they're always going to be there to remind them. Men don't have that. I'll get to that in a minute though, because it's more. I think it's more prevalent. You can see what I'm talking about in the Council of Elrond in Rivendell. We'll get to that in a second.
Yes.
But it's almost like the elves have this codified morality, and it's kind of imprinted on them. And it's just there forever, and that's how they live. You know, they live in perfect harmony with nature. They can only die by war or a broken heart.
Which I think is perfect. I think that's so just sort of beautiful in the description of how the elves work, is that they either die by battle or by heartbreak. And it's almost like it's similar to the Viking way of life. It's similar to almost a less rugged version of that, of course, because there's many differences between the Kingdom of Norway and the Kingdom of Lothlorien. But nonetheless, I totally get what you're getting at here, in the sense that I love also that we understand within Silmarillion is that the dwarves, they're made out of pure rock. This is why they're so rigid and so hard to kill, because they're made of stone. Like, this is the coolest thing. And the elves, they're beautiful. They're made of this earth and the trees, and they're part of the world. And I think that's what when you're talking about how they don't have to pass on knowledge, it's, to me, it's kind of, it makes sense, because we see that, like you say, in how they sort of treat men as like, oh, how come you don't know this? Like, we can't rely on these people.
That's it. Yeah, it's almost like, well, we know this already. Why don't you?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we weren't taught by the gods themselves. You know, it's like we were taught by our fathers, and they were taught by their fathers, and their fathers, and so on and so forth. And like, you know, however many generations back, and it's like, well, the original message has been lost. You know,
That's it's so perfect, because when Elrond says, "I was there 3,000 years ago, Gandalf," and the fire's
long
telling us,
time, isn't it?
it's like 3,000 years. You drive yourself mad by the end of that, and yet he's there, wise and intact, and that to me is why he is part God, because there's almost this ability to not go insane.
I suppose it's almost like he's got some kind of transcendent consciousness. You know, he's not weighed down by life like men can be.
Yeah.
You know, he's fully aware of the higher power as well, because he knows that's where everything comes from.
I love that.
I was going to say something there. I can't remember. Sorry, go on.
No, I love the fact that we don't need to be told that there's higher beings. We're not told about the higher beings. We're shown the higher beings, and they don't. There's in the movie. There's a lot of show and not tell. And yes, you have the beginning description, but that scene is merely the intro, and we're given throughout the entire film a lot of showing of beautiful scenery, but also a lot of talking and interaction that sort of gives us this understanding of there's greater forces acting in the background.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk to them, but they're there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's to jump forward a bit, although we'll obviously go back and start at the beginning of the film properly. But I think it's that what I just explained there. It kind of it's shown in the Council of Elrond, right? Because when the ring is placed on the mantelpiece, whatever it is, on the altar, and you have all these beings of Middle-earth sitting around it, and you basically have a child who's Frodo for all intents and purposes, you know, someone who's not initiated into the world of manhood, so to speak. And then you have a load of immortal beings, and I know that dwarves aren't immortal, but
they do live a long time. They live a long time,
and they're incredibly tough as well. And then you have a few men, and you have Boromir, and Boromir. We obviously don't see it until in the films, until the Two Towers, but in his homeland, in Minas Tirith, he is regarded as being the ultimate man, you know, the archetypal man. He's the man that everyone should aspire to be. He's big, he's tough, he's incredibly skilled with the sword, he's a good leader, he's a good warrior, king, warrior, magician, lover, you know, that sort of idea. But he's incomplete. And I think it's shown clearly with the difference between him and Aragorn, because he was raised in Minas Tirith, right? And he, you know, the White City, the way he talks about it, the White City is like this literally the kingdom of heaven on earth. And so for him, and I would imagine all the men that follow him, their ideal is on the ground. It's flesh and blood in the city of Minas Tirith, and that's heaven for them, because they don't have this, you know, transcendent ideal, maybe because they don't have a codified morality of some sort. And so for them, the city is the greatest thing in the world, in existence. And so the first thing Boromir thinks of is, well, I need to save my city, because it is actually crumbling. And so obviously he wants the ring for themselves, and he wants the ring for Minas Tirith, and so on and so forth. Why not use this ring? And, you know, claim back the lands that were once ours, and so on and so forth. But then the difference between him and Aragorn wasn't raised in Minas Tirith. He wasn't raised around other men. He is a man, but he was raised in Rivendell. He was raised with the elves. And obviously the elves have this transcendent morality of some sort. And so he knows that there is something better, something greater than what is on earth. And so he knows that to use it would be folly.
And that's why he's a friend of Gandalf, because he's a friend of a god.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Because he starts the film off as Strider, and he says, "I'm a friend of Gandalf the Grey." So we're introduced to him not as Aragorn the king, but Aragorn as the friend of a being of light.
Yeah, and I suppose having a friendship or any relationship with someone like that, it would, if they told you to do something, you would probably do it. You'd probably listen to them. Yeah,
exactly. And also, like, the fact that his best friend is an elf, a being who's lived for thousands of years, also adds that.
Absolutely. And I think that part of the reason that these stories are so good It's not because it's one, because typically with any kind of fantasy or mythology, it's a hero's journey. It's a monomyth.
Yes.
And obviously that's what Joseph Campbell called it, the monomyth.
Yeah.
And I think Lord of the Rings is so good because it isn't just one. It's not just one heroic journey. It's not just Frodo's, attempts to become, sort of grow up, so to speak.
Yes.
You have Frodo's heroic journey. You also have Aragorn's. Gandalf himself also goes through a heroic journey of his own sort. And in the film, at least, Pippin goes through his as well. And Mary goes through a tiny little one. But so it's basically it's four narratives woven into one beautiful story. And I think that's why it's so powerful, because you're not only seeing one archetypal story, which you might see with the Avengers, you might see the Marvel films, which are good, but they're not anywhere near although they are absolutely fantastic, but they're not close to this level.
It feels real. Although it's a fantasy film, it feels like those relationships, those friendships, those adventures to become a hero could be reality if we'd gone back to the ages of battling for one's honour and one's country, which is no longer a thing anymore. But nonetheless, I totally agree with you.
It's a good point actually, because when Tolkien was writing these stories, he wrote about them. He wrote about them after he'd finished. But the way he talks about it, he had experiences similar to Carl Jung, and he had like in 1914, I think, Carl Jung had started having visions of some immense imagery, and one of them was a tidal wave of blood flowing across Europe. I think which was before World War One, but he had numerous experiences where he would depart from this reality that we're in right now, and he would go into the realm of the unconscious, and he would have experiences there that were so real that he couldn't tell the difference between this reality and that reality. And he actually slept with a revolver under his pillow or in his bedside drawer in case he couldn't, recover. And when Tolkien spoke about these stories, about The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, he spoke about them as if he didn't write them. It's as if he was experiencing what was already there, what had already happened.
I think he did. I think through the World War, he did.
And definitely. But I think in even more literally than that, I think he went somewhere and experienced these stories. He wrote a story, a wonderful little story called Leaf by Niggle, and it's about this character. Niggle is a painter, and he's not a very good one. But the reason he's not very good is because he takes ages over. He obsesses painstakingly over every detail. And in the book, he's drawing he's painting this picture of a tree, and it's like every single leaf has all the little veins and it has all the bark and everything. And at the end of his life, he's got a beautiful picture, like a lifelike picture of a tree. But he isn't happy with it, because in his mind, the tree is situated against a backdrop of beautiful mountains, and it's kind of like I don't know if allegory is the right word, but it's almost like if you imagine that Tolkien is Niggle, the artist. He only gave us the tree, but for him, he could see the mountains and he could see the hill and the grass that it was on, and he could see all this detail which he couldn't convey to us.
Yes.
And I can't help but think that the only way you could have that much detail is through direct experience. And I think he did have his own, experiences of it.
I agree. I think it was, for your son to carry on your vision after you've died, that vision must be so powerful and so dramatic in how it changes humanity, let alone the writing itself. It puts that vision to be, if it's in one man's mind, can you imagine having to deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
Oh yeah, it'd be. I mean, you wouldn't be able to do anything else.
Mm.
really, would you? You wouldn't have time for a job. You wouldn't be able to cope with it because it'd just be so powerful. But I was reading recently. I got a book on Nietzsche.
Mm.
It's like a simple guide to Nietzsche, which is perfect for me. But in it, he talks about how Nietzsche's sort of teachings. He indirectly learned a lot from Immanuel Kant and then Arthur Schopenhauer. And I think was it Kant or Schopenhauer? One or two. I think it might have been Schopenhauer. Was it Kant? I think it was Kant. Immanuel. I'm going to make sure I say the word Kant, not.
Yes, yeah. This is a clean podcast.
I'm not going to slur my words on that. Immanuel Kant. He had this idea that we only could see the reality that we were gifted by evolution, so to speak.
Yes.
Although he was before Darwin, so I don't think he used those words exactly. But he basically called what we can interact with, what we can perceive, he called it phenomena. And that's things as they appear, right? And he said that underneath there was something called noumena, which is things as they are. And that is the reality that underlies what we can actually perceive. And I think that's where mythological stories come from, where powerful fantasies come from, is the you might call it an archetypal reality. You know, it's the ultimate reality.
Yes.
And I think that's where this stories comes from Tolkien. I think he actually went there. You know, his rational mind disappeared. He lost himself in the unconscious, and he had these experiences, and then he came back and told us about them.
Yeah, and so, can you imagine trying to explain that to people back in 1914?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you ever read any of Jung, but I'd imagine, it would have been incredibly difficult to comprehend it for yourself. Because it's even hard. I wouldn't say I'm a particularly articulate person anyway, but it's hard to even describe that.
Yeah, it's true, because you look at the Shire itself. It is a archetypal perfect haven, and it is a symbol heaven itself. Exactly. Yeah.
And obviously in the film, the music, the Shire music is kind of, it hints that that's what it is.
Yes.
That beautiful flute music.
Well, I do have that written down. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an indication, it's an intimation of, of something divine. It's literally heaven on earth for the hobbits.
Yeah. Well, it's the funny thing is, and you know this already, but the Bible itself has the Garden of Eden, doesn't it? But the Garden of Eden just means walled, well-watered place. And so it's almost as if Tolkien's recreated at the beginning of this film this, beautiful remote land that hides small actions, small people, but keeps the place at peace. And it's not until, in the book, Frodo doesn't leave the Shire until 50 years after we begin the story. So it's the movie speeds that up, and it's Gandalf who's the symbol of truth. So I think Tolkien's got this person from the outside, this person who has knowledge. So you know how Jung and how Nietzsche, they really value the words of truth, and how you talk about God, how he spoke the world into being. The same with having the Valar, how they used music. Well, it's funny because Gandalf does something on a smaller scale. He gives outside world information into the Shire. So the Shire looks at him. He's a troublemaker. He's a do-gooder. Like he's coming in, and it's because Frodo and Bilbo like him because he brings in reality, like a small bit of reality that's being sort of injected into the Shire, and it's this beautiful beginning where we see this mirage where you're talking about how Tolkien brings this reality that he's living in. Well, I think you're right. I think he starts off the story with this mirage that's like not real. It's not, but he's aware of it. Like he's the funny thing is though, is that New Zealand makes this story greater than it already is because it's almost as if it is real, and it is to some extent.
Definitely.
But I love that. I love that Gandalf is this person who's bringing in the outside world, and for the Shire, and only in the book we ever see it get turned into the reality.
At the end of the Return of the King,
Yes, but apart from that, in the film we just see it, and we see the arrival of Gandalf as like an arrival of knowledge and events of the outside world, and the attachment of the rings is shown on as when he touches the ring, he is the pure white light that, you know, can be easily corrupted again. I love that. It's just a repeating message that we just see in the beginning. And what you were saying about how Tolkien's living in and out, I think that's what I think he's Gandalf. Like, Tolkien sees himself as Gandalf, and he's like going in and out of the real world.
Okay.
But it might not be. Who knows? I
mean, so the thing with rule number 1 of dream interpretation is that the dreamer is always right. And so if the you know, whoever is analysing it, if they say something and it strikes a chord with the dreamer, then it's probably correct. But if the dreamer doesn't think it's right, it's not right.
Yeah.
And the thing with a film or with great literature, you are actually partaking in a dream. Although it's not your dream, it's not generated by you, you do still have your own experience. And so your interpretation is actually correct in a sense for you.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But isn't that beautiful? I love that. I love that ability for everybody can have a perspective. And on top of that, everybody can sort of get this. I think it's an ecstasy. And I don't know if that's too much to say, but it's almost as if this dream that has been generated by someone else creates an ecstasy. And for me, I would say that the Shire, to me, is this paradise on earth that starts off the film with this greatest shot of peace. And we're fed throughout the film this, you know, as it gets on, this raw reality of what the actual world's like, because you've got goblins and orcs and, you know, and it's the same in real life. You start off as a naive child, and like you said with Frodo, this is his story of gaining knowledge, is that this naive child is fed some truth, and as they grow up, they start to realise. Exactly.
And I suppose the ring is like his own realization of his own sort of power. You know, he can dominate other people if he wanted to.
Yes, which is kind of funny why Sam follows him the entire film, which kind of makes sense, isn't it? Like, oh no.
Yeah, but that's voluntary, isn't it? Although I suppose it's kind of not actually, because Gandalf says, "Don't you lose him."
Yes.
So it would be but obviously Sam is very dutiful. And Sam is like, we'll get to, because I had when they get to Amon Hen, that's like the first test, so to speak, and we'll get to that in a bit. But Frodo, he's had a good upbringing. You know, he had Bilbo was kind of his ideal. Again, it wouldn't be that they have a kind of codified transcendent morality or anything, but they have good examples. Yes. And Bilbo is a good example of someone who he matured properly, and he didn't become tyrannical. You know, he didn't become nasty.
No, you're totally right. And he could have. He had the full ability to basically turn the Shire into his own sort of party, if you say, like, for negativity, all you want to put. I mean, he could have turned into Gollum. He could have had this ability to just ensnare the people around him.
Definitely. And obviously when Bilbo, we're kind of shown early on that Bilbo is a great ideal, because when it came down to it, he was actually able to give up the ring.
Yes.
You know,
I love that scene.
Little bit of encouragement.
Yes.
But it wasn't actually that difficult. And as soon as, and obviously the music is very, it kind of tells you what's going on. It's very tense, very difficult. And the moment he steps outside his door, he then turns around and says to Gandalf, "I thought of an ending to my book," and the music changes back to the Shire music.
Yes.
And so it's like, oh, so he's back in heaven now, and he's good. He's passed the test, and he's good, and he's off, going. But you're so right. Blue yonder.
Yeah, I totally. It's almost like his shoulders go down. The weight of the world has gone. He is now back to Bilbo. He's back to, you know, like you said, he's passed the test. He let go of the ring.
And he can pass on to the next stage of his life, which is for him to be an old man, and he can go and enjoy his retirement, so to speak. Yeah.
I love it. I love that scene. I'm so glad you brought that up. It is. It's when you hear the thud of the ring on the floor, the music behind it. Either. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
I wonder how they actually did that, because normally rings would bounce. I'd imagine they had like a rubber, rubber tile or something they dropped on. It's cleverly done.
I loved it. And from there, what you're describing then is Gandalf leaves again. So as quickly as he comes in, he quickly leaves out as well. I love that.
Yeah.
So as the real world comes in, the Shire goes back to normal, back into this paradise, and the knowledge of the real world fades away. And 50 years go on, and then Gandalf comes
17
back.
in the book.
Sorry. I think Frodo's quite old by that point, isn't he? He's quite old for us, but not old for him in real. And he's gone to Gondor, and we realise the true nature of the ring because he puts it into the fire, and we see what the writing on the ring, and that's so like it's biblical, isn't it? In the sense that you see these like written lines. It's like
and it's like this ancient language that no one can read anymore. Obviously, Gandalf does, but it is. It's like it's like reading hieroglyphics. Something. It's like it makes no sense to. It's not written in English.
Oh, mate, I totally agree. And how they carved it into the ring and the lighting going on to Frodo's face, it's just it's as if that writing it was like burnt into the into the world. This reflection, and I love it. I love that scene. But this leads on to the leaving. So they leave the Shire after this, and it's this process where Frodo has to take Sam, and they've got these Nazgul chasing them.
It's agents of chaos, agents of darkness.
That's exactly. These black riders, these cloaked beings of darkness chasing them, and it leads on to Saruman's betrayal. And I was wondering whether you had any thoughts on that alone, because
I did. Quite a few on that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate them, but I'll certainly give it a go. So with in that scene where Gandalf has found out what the ring is, and he's telling Frodo he needs to leave, go to Prancing Pony. Gandalf doesn't actually know what to do. But he's doing stuff. He's trying his best. He's saying, "Go here, I'll meet you here. I'm going to go and speak to my wise old man." Because as an archetypal thing, the wise old man is Gandalf to Frodo, but Gandalf's wise old man is Saruman. He is Gandalf's ideal, the head of the Order of the Five Wizards, and very wise, very powerful, and he'll know what to do. And so it's almost like I hate to say it, but it's almost like he's passing the buck. It's like, give me a minute. I'm going to go and check with Dad. I'll see what.
I love it. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Let me go get the manager.
Literally, yeah. And so when he arrives at Isengard, we see this great big tower. It's built of stone. It's obviously been there a long time, and it's black. It's very powerful. It's going to last a long time. And it's daytime as Gandalf rides in, right? And he meets Saruman at the steps. And they go in, and Gandalf doesn't realise what he's got himself into until they start fighting, right? And they start fighting over because he realises that Saruman has... I don't think Saruman has lost his mind, but I think Saruman thinks that there is no hope. So we might as well just give up and join the dark side. And then what happens in the film, the image is Gandalf is thrown up to the top of the Tower of Orthanc.
Yes.
Now, the direction itself doesn't really matter that much, but what actually happens is he is thrown through the veil, and he has the illusion of reality being this peaceful... I suppose the world just kind of being in order.
Yes.
The illusion, the veil is lifted, and he now sees what he's been missing, and what he's been missing is that Saruman has been building an army. There's orcs everywhere, and now everything is on fire. And so it's kind of suggested that Gandalf fell through a portal, but he never escaped it. He was the first one to realise that it's actually a lot worse than you realise, and we need to get a move on here. But obviously he's stuck at the top of the tower until he's rescued by the eagle.
Yeah. It's sort of picturesque, isn't it, in the sense that we see this beautiful greenery around Orthanc, and then suddenly, when Gandalf looks down from the tower, like you say, the veil's lifted, and we see these burning trees, like burning everywhere, and fire, and like you say,
and it's nighttime as well.
Oh,
so
mate.
He's been thrown into the unconscious, isn't he?
It says to me, because Gandalf's in grey still, and Saruman is white, and it's almost like that satanic idea where the greatest white, bright light can become the greatest darkness, in the sense that we see this bright light fall. Because Saruman is the leader of the Order. He was sent by the Valar to save the world, and he's obviously seen that there's just such little hope in the world that he just gives in, and he says, this mission is folly, we shouldn't do it, let's build an army and join the guy who basically is the son of the devil.
Because at least we might survive then, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so sort of the sigil of his white hand, the white hand of Saruman and the orcs, is just so sort of sticks in your mind, because you look at it and you see white, but really it's almost like the same as the black hand of Mordor.
Yeah, definitely. It's like the white sort of symbolises, or is supposed to symbolise good consciousness, isn't it?
Exactly.
Or good, maybe good morality or something like that. And Saruman has twisted it and bent it to his own will, and so now the Uruk-hai that he's got, or that he will have eventually in the story, they have this sigil, and they think that it is the thing that they should be, striving for. It's like it's their ideal.
Yes.
And they're obviously filled with hate, and although maybe they're not filled with hate, maybe they're filled with like the joy of the hunt to commit evil deeds.
There's no restriction. They're born into this world through darkness, and they're given darkness upon them. So there's real for like, to be fair to the Uruk-hai and the orcs, there's no light for them. They are born.
No, there was no chance for them at all. Was there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I can't say the same for orcs, because technically speaking, they used to be elves and they became dark through Melkor. But
I mean, you'd imagine that if you were to torture an immortal being for long enough, that they would eventually break.
Yes. Yeah.
And obviously the kind of torture that a god could put on a flesh
standard being.
It would be pretty bad. I would imagine. I imagine that most things would break.
Which to me as well, because we see these elves as strong beings in reality, I think you're backed up. That's really emphasised by the fact that throughout all of the movies we see these armies of elves who are consistently resisting the darkness. You're backed up by the fact that, well, if they're resisting the darkness here, imagine what it took to take them to become orcs.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But anyway, we go from there to the prancing pony, and I love that.
Just one more point on that.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So when Gandalf is thrown into hell, effectively, that's a death of God motif there. So God, for Gandalf at least, God is now dead. So hope for him is now pretty much gone. And it's only when he gets the moth to fly off and get Gwaihir, the Wind Lord, to come and save him. That's the only bit of hope that the only ray of hope he gets, because he doesn't see. There's no light. There's no ray of sunshine that we see imagistically in the film, because it's obviously not there.
Well, it's pouring rain, isn't it? It's just like grim. It's destruction alone. So when you see that tiny little moth fly into his hand, and he speaks like the softest sort of language you've ever heard in your life, it's like, the hope, it flies.
Yeah, and I suppose it's like kind of like the Eye of Horus, isn't it? He's now paying attention. He can now see from above ground. He can see the evil that is on the ground, because the forces of evil have revealed themselves now. They're out. They're fully out in the open. They're not hiding anymore.
Yes.
And he's the only one so far who can see it. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think that imagery you're describing there, you're giving yourself a hard time when you say you can't articulate anything. That's perfectly described.
The problem I have is that I think in images.
Yes.
So I have to translate those images into words, and it's so difficult to do. Yeah. I really have to think about these things for a lot. But maybe when we do another one of these.
Mate, 100%.
Yeah, I think. I don't know how long this is going to last, but I'm not sure we're going to get to the end of the film. So we might have to
mate, we've hit pages 1.5, So we're like, you know, I don't know how long we're in here, but you know, it's low enough.
I've got all evening, so I have
No,
no rush.
but I'm happy to carry on. I'm happy to carry on.
Yeah, definitely.
And so we've got the prancing pony, and so you've described how Gandalf he's hit with reality, but Frodo and the hobbits, they're still thinking that everything's fine, everything's Gucci. The only thing that they're aware of is the 9 ring wraiths who are seeking them, and they're not aware of what they are.
Interacted with them yet, so they haven't been hit in the face with reality yet. But obviously when they get to so where were we? Are we at the prancing pony at the moment?
Yes, so we go to the prancing pony. We get there. The hobbits, you know, it's pouring down with rain. The symbolism is carrying on from what we've seen with Gandalf, and we go in there, and they're trying to hide their identity. And this is the first time we see Frodo interact with the ring, and he sort of like he enters the shadow realm for the first time, which is just I love it because we see the future, you know, we see Strider, we see Aragorn in the corner, and he witnesses him enter the shadow realm, and isn't sort of. We don't understand whether Strider Aragorn is a good being or a bad being, because we initially think 'cause he's shrouded in darkness in the corner of the bloody pub, we think he's a bad guy. Smoking his pipe. Yeah, exactly. And you see the red light hit his eyes, so it's almost like he's an evil being.
Yeah, but, he's shrouded in mystery, isn't he?
Yes.
So but I like the imagery with the prancing pony, because it's like when it's like children are entering the world of men. You know, they've left the Shire, which is this paradise, which is like a paradise for them, and they go into the place where it's loud, people are rough, people are tough, and they aren't like them, because they haven't been through anything yet. They haven't been through any trials like those men would have been. And so all the men have been, you know, I'd imagine that living in Middle Earth, it might be quite picturesque, and certainly for us to look at it, it would be, it's really beautiful. But for them, it'd still be a hard life. You know, you have to scratch a living in whatever way you could. And so obviously they're sort of drinking away their sorrows because life is difficult.
Yes.
And for the hobbits, it's like it's not difficult for them yet, because they haven't experienced anything, but they get a glimpse of what being a man is like.
Getting a pint.
yeah. Then obviously Pippin goes along, and he kind of spoils the show. I can't remember if he does that in the book. I don't think he does.
Not that I'm aware of. I think it's just a purely film-based sort of scenario.
Which makes sense, because there's only so much information you can really get into a film. There's obviously the books are unequivocal in their grandeur, but the films are great representations of them, I would say.
Yeah, I think condensing the film to, you know, even in the extended edition when it's 3.5 hours, there's still so much more that is in depth within the book, which is fine. But at the same time, there's only so long that I can stare at the screen for.
Exactly. And there's also in the book, you don't have the same idea of the scenery, and you don't have the music as well.
No.
And obviously the music adds like this third or fourth dimensional element to the experience of the dream, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. I think when they have the 9 enter the prancing pony, that is just, you know, you get the smoke underneath their cloaks, and you have the darkness, and the pub owner's like holding his pillow to himself, crying,
holding his teddy bear,
and you've got this noise in the background where it's like, you know, very soft, and then as they get their swords out, and it's like bang, all the noise in the world just echoes, and then we realise that the hobbits have been saved by Aragorn. And I love that scene because of how it's visually stunning. Like, I have no idea how they got the 9 to look so deathly in how they've done it, but it's brilliant.
Very clever, isn't it?
Yeah,
very, very clever. Because they're kind of like faceless, nameless, featureless, horrible beings. You know?
Yes.
I was going to say like stormtroopers, but they're much more powerful, way more scary than stormtroopers. But you get the idea. It's like just agents of chaos, and it doesn't really matter on the detail of them, because they're all basically the same. But they're all
they're all powerful and evil, and and they're willing to kill children. So they are pretty fucking bad.
Yeah, that.
Sorry to swear, but yeah, they are.
No, it's fine. But they are, and you're right. They are the pure evil, and they are. I think they're literally parts of Sauron now. So they become parts of Sauron, and they are literally his beings.
Or maybe they're even worse than Sauron, because Sauron is telling them to do this, but they're actually doing it. You know, they're actually willing to carry it out.
Yeah,
certainly. So yeah, and they're not doing it for themselves, because there's no benefit for them.
No,
the only benefit is for Sauron, and so maybe they're even worse than but anyway, but who knows?
Because they don't even stand for anything, really.
Exactly. Yeah, they're kind of like hollow men, aren't they?
Yeah, that's so true. I like that. But we find out that through flame is their weakness on Amon Su, which is kind of interesting, because I never, like, they're white beings, they're darkness. You'd think that in a world, because, you know, Mordor is like flame and destruction and lava. You wouldn't know that these black beings' weakness would be basically Aragorn throwing a torch into their face. Which is intriguing.
It's a good scene, that.
Yes.
It's a good scene, because it's like, so Aragorn took them off into the wild, and you can imagine, again, to reference the unconscious, you can imagine the wild as being the realm of the unconscious, because it's the road that they're not sticking to roads, so they're not sticking to the known. They're off into the realm of the unknown, and they're following what they assume is this great man, or at least just a man who is their friend, because they don't know anything about him yet.
Yeah.
And he leads them to the watchtower of Amon Sul, and it's this watchtower is obviously built by great men of the past, and it's built on stone, so it's very, very powerful. It's very strong, lasts a long time, but it's fallen to ruin, and they take refuge there. And through their own kind of naivety, their inexperience, they alert the Nazgul to where they are. So the Nazgul find them, and they're starting to. This is the moment where the hobbits get smacked in the face with reality. But essentially, this is where they realise that they're not in heaven anymore. Although it does look like heaven for us, because obviously the New Zealand's very beautiful. But for them, there's these 5 beings of darkness in front of them. You imagine how terrifying that would actually be, and they're about to stab them.
Yeah. Which sort of like Sam, yeah, exactly. Like where he goes and attacks him.
So this is like it's their first test, really. And Sam passes the test because he goes for them. He's back you devils, and he goes for it. He loses, but that doesn't matter. He actually went for it. He actually made the attempt. Merry and Pippin are kind of neutral. They get thrown aside, although they do stand together. So there is, the bond they have there is very
Union.
powerful.
Yeah.
And then Frodo, he's overwhelmed by the fear, and he's not able to stand up to it. So he fails the test because he drops his sword, and he basically faints.
Yeah, he does.
You know, like in those old movies where the woman faints.
Yeah, exactly.
That's basically what happens. And he decides then, in his fear, panic-stricken state, he decides then to retreat into the unconscious by putting the ring on. Without realizing that they are the masters of the unconscious, so to speak. Certainly the dark aspects of it.
Yes.
And then when he puts it on, that alerts them. They know who he is, and he's got the ring, and they want it. So they stab him. And so now he's been, in the unconscious, he's been damaged by what he encountered, and he's not able to pull himself back out of it. And that's why when Aragorn is, when they're trying to get to Rivendell and they're 6 days from it, then Aragorn, I think, knows that it's pretty much done. And Frodo's saving grace is, so he's in the unconscious. He's not in the lights of consciousness anymore. And in the unconscious, he encounters an anima figure, and that's in Arwen. And this is like this perfect, beautiful woman. And obviously Liv Tyler, incredibly beautiful.
I've got it written down here that she's the white light of grace. This like the complete opposite to the white beings of the unconscious, which is what the 9 ring wraiths are. And so, like you say, her beauty and her, because it's almost like we see the two things. We see what she is in the unconscious, because she appears in this white, this white dress and this beautiful light. And then we see her just in her garb, where she's wearing like a darker robe. And so it's very symbolic. I love that that scene.
Very
super symbolic.
And the music and everything is beautiful as well. And, and that's the only reason that Frodo really survives. Obviously, in the books, it's Glorfindel who saves him. But the images in the film are. I actually think it's a better choice to criticise Tolkien's work, not so much. But I think it's a better choice to use Arwen because it's an anima figure. Yeah, and she sort of breathes life back into him, in a sense, and manages to actually get him across the river, to Rivendell. I
think it also backs up your point earlier, because she saves him through, what does she say? She saves him through her voice. That backs up your ideas earlier of saying that, like, we bring life into the world. Well, Frodo's life is saved through the power of the voice.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's fascinating to see that, and as we see the chase that happens, we've seen that the wraiths are still alive. They were weakened by fire, and then we see.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was gonna mention.
Go for it.
Sorry to interrupt.
So
sure. When Frodo dives into the unconscious because he thinks that's going to save him, but he's not capable of actually navigating it, so he gets hurt by it. But then we see, a savior. The figure, Aragorn. He's a dark figure, but he's wielding light. The light of consciousness. He's wielding this flame, and he's got his sword, his steel sword. And he's fighting these forces of darkness and stuff. And obviously, then he triumphs. And so that's obviously when the hobbits realise that he is the man that they should be following. And it's also when the audience first see that he is a savior figure, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. And he's part of the good. And we start to realise, like, this character is no longer a question of mystery. He is the good guy in this film, and he defends against he is the light that fights against the darkness. It is kind of incredible, the fact that this one man fights off 5 beings of darkness at once. I always found that absolutely impressive, by the fact that Aragorn was able to fight off these monsters that, as we saw later in the films, kill hundreds of men. Like, kill hundreds.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was always impressed by the fact that he killed, he was able to fight off 5 of them.
Yeah, he did very well there. And obviously Arwen is able to outrun 9 of them.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, actually, because when they get to, I forget what the river's called now. I'm pretty certain it's named in the book.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is. But when they cross the river, and she speaks the magic. She speaks the river to wash them away.
Yes.
They don't die.
No.
And obviously, in psychoanalytic terms, I don't know if that's the right word, but you can't destroy a part of your own personality, right? All that happens is, if you do that, what you do is you push it to the back of your mind, where it can project itself out into the world. And obviously, water is quite often used as an image or a symbol of the unconscious. And so water comes, washes these beings away, and they go back to Mordor. And when we next see them, they're even more powerful. They've got upgrades. They're flying on dragons, basically. So yeah, that was just an interesting point, I thought.
No, I love that, because I saw it differently. I saw like this. Water is the weakness of fire, and that's why the Nazgul were washed away. So I'm very intrigued by that, because you're pushing the darkness to the back of the mind. It is very similar, because the elves are trying to leave Middle Earth, and so they're repressing the fact that the darkness has spread. So that makes so much more sense than me thinking that the fires of hell are being washed away by the waters.
Well, I mean, they certainly go back to the fires of hell. It's only, I suppose, it's only when they actually get there that they're able to recoup.
Yeah.
They regenerate themselves. So yeah.
No, that's a fascinating point, and up to this point, the road to Rivendell has been super treacherous. And we've seen this.
Well, they've now been hit. They've been hit in the face with reality now, haven't they?
Yes, yeah. And the Shire like presents the haven, one of wisdom and of peace is more Rivendell. So like the Shire, we see Rivendell as another haven, but it's really different. It's like they've seen like this treacherous road, and so there's a connection. You've got the two heavens that are connected by hell, which is kind of crazy, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I suppose Rivendell is in a sense it's different to the Shire because the beings within it they're not naive about evil itself, but in the Shire they kind of are. And obviously when Frodo wakes up, it's obviously very bright and it's very it's lights. It looks beautiful, and Gandalf is there, and Elrond and all the elves are there. And I had another point there that was going to be better than what I just said.
But I knew you were going to bring up. We were going to talk about the fact that men, dwarves, and elves meet to decide the fate of the world, and this like leads to an argument where it's almost like a constant battle with themselves, because each aspect of men, dwarfs, and elves, they're all a different aspect of the world. And you were talking about earlier how the fact that this sort of gathering is almost like these different parts of being itself have gathered to decide whether to fall into darkness or to fall into light.
Different parts of the psyche.
Exactly.
If you were going to equate Arda or Middle Earth or the entire world, if you're going to equate the events of the Lord of the Rings as the events of what happens in someone's psyche, you would. All of them would be coming together to discuss the one great evil, which actually I think they did very well there. Because normally what happens if people are sat around talking about what to do, they kind of assume that they're good.
Yeah.
And so the bad is kind of left out, but the ring is there. It's actually in the room with them, so they can't ignore the bad, and so they're actually shining a light on it, so to speak.
And as the arguments of the men starts to sort of bubble up, we see the fire form around the ring.
And Frodo is getting increasingly. I suppose he's almost like going into a panic state again.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah, he goes into this almost drug addicted, like, no, stop. Just starts shaking almost. It's like, But I love that. I think that scene is brilliant. And in the extended version, we see Gandalf say black speech. We see Mordor tongue. And that to me is like you've just described, we see in this pure haven, we've got all the good, we formed all the psyche, and Gandalf's like, right, I'm going to bring some reality to you guys. You're so naive. Here's the darkness that we're facing. And bang, we're brought in, and it's like, holy crap. And when Elrond says, no one has ever uttered black speech here, it's almost like, I don't seek your forgiveness. This is the only way we could sort of get people to understand what we have here.
Yeah, definitely. It's looking directly into the shadow, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because it's only broken by the pure voice of Frodo. So the child breaks, the argument of the men, which is it's this the only way to deter the ring from destroying men is through kindness, purity. So whatever like Frodo represents at the beginning, almost. Which is
because he's no longer naive anymore. He isn't fully mature, but he isn't naive anymore in the same way that he was, and so he does kind of understand that it is a big thing he is saying, but at the same time it needs to happen because he's the only one. But he seems to be the only one who is capable of not arguing about it, because it doesn't seem to have the same effect on him that it has on everyone else. So, and then obviously they band up and they say, we'll come with you. And they have the fellowship, the nine of them have, and they're about to go off. And then when Frodo's getting dressed, when Bilbo's given him the mithril shirt, so he was Frodo's ideal, right? And he gave up the ring when he was supposed to. But obviously the temptation is still always going to be there. And he hasn't seen the shadow, or he hasn't seen the ring for a long time.
And when he does see it, it's like this momentary reach. He like grasps at it, like in the same way that Gollum might, and he has the wide eyes and horrible teeth and stuff. And it's like, so Bilbo has lived his whole life never succumbing effectively to the ring, and he gave it up when he could, when he was asked to. But then in the final moment he had with Frodo before he left, he feels like he failed because he burst into tears. He didn't really, because I don't know that anyone has infinite stamina. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, even Frodo, like at the end of the day, you can't. Anyone who bears the ring, even Sauron himself, succumbs to the darkness that is the ring.
And obviously, Bilbo kind of knows that he is supposed to be Frodo's ideal, and he thinks that he has just failed Frodo. But he has,
because he says, "I'm sorry to have brought this burden on you, my boy."
Yeah, and I'm sorry for everything. And it's like, what are you sorry for? Like, Frodo should be thankful for everything. And I think he is. He doesn't say it, but he would be. I was going to say something there. I had it. What was it? So he reaches for the ring in this last moment of temptation, and he loses, so to speak. But he doesn't obviously give in entirely, because he doesn't fight Frodo for it. He doesn't beat him to death or anything. I had something. It was good.
It's always the way, mate, when you're going through an analysis of this depth. But I understand where you're trying to go, and the form that Bilbo takes is mortifying. Like, you don't see an image of anyone good in the film like that ever again. Like, it's the only time we see any of the characters of good become sort of just the worst part of themselves, apart from Boromir, maybe. It's incredible, and that scene shows that even the best of us can succumb to a small amount of darkness.
Definitely, so Bilbo is supposed to be Frodo's ideal, although Frodo has a different ideal, because he has matured a little bit, and he understands that the ring would make him do that, and he understands why. He understands how powerful it is, and I think that's why he forgives him immediately. It's like it's no big thing. Like, don't worry about it, because it's not anyone would give in. Certainly he's just seen an entire council of supposedly wise beings have all just gone up in been shouting at each other over it.
Yes.
And so it's no wonder that Bilbo had that moment.
Yeah. I totally agree, mate. I think that Bilbo is so, like, he's so cool, because like, I don't want to sound like basic there, but in my opinion, like, the fact that he goes from the Hobbit, like, he does this amazing adventure, and then he comes to the Fellowship, and by then we see him as an old man, and he doesn't give himself any credit. Like you say, there's this, like, you've done all of this, like, you've finished your journey.
He still thinks he's failed.
It's like the hero who just won't accept that he's done the endless road. Like, the road is endless for Bilbo, and we see that by the end of the trilogy, is that he is immortal technically, and his age, he's never allowed to rest, basically, because of the ring. And I think that's why he feels like he's failed, because, like, for him, his prolonging age is his payment for this. And he just wants to die. He just wants to end in this, and that's why he says to Gandalf, like, he lived happily ever after. Like, that sort of just, he wants it to end at that point. But maybe I'm looking into it too deeply there. But that's how.
Well,
that's
yeah.
how
I don't know. He necessarily wants to die, but I think he longs for the adventure again. But he's willing in spirit, but not in body. He can't physically take it. But obviously for him, he went through the trials, and he passed. He came out the other side, mature, and so he got to spend, at least until the end of the last book, he got to spend his retirement in heaven, basically in Rivendell.
Yeah.
Been taken care of by magic immortal beings.
Yeah, exactly.
So you'd have to be pretty worthy for that. I'm sure they wouldn't just let you rock up and just stay there forever. And so,
I think it's the humility of Bilbo. I think it's humility. That's why he's accepted by the elves, because they understand that he has done those trials, but he's unwilling to admit that he is as good as he is.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. He certainly doesn't think too highly of himself.
He doesn't. But that's probably why Frodo is able to carry the ring, because he doesn't quite grasp his impact on others.
Yeah, and he was the right ideal for Frodo.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, exactly.
He was the perfect ideal for him. He's the perfect model for Frodo's own behaviour.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So we move on to there, to the road to Moria, basically.
Yeah, and they turn left out of the river.
Yes, I love that. Yeah. Which way's to Mordor, Gandalf? Left. Yeah. I love it.
But before they leave, though, we see one last encounter between Aragorn. Actually, no, there's two. There's two things we need to cover. So there's the encounter between Boromir and the shards of Narsil and Aragorn.
Yes.
And then also the encounter between Aragorn and Arwen.
I totally forgot about that. Yeah, that's so right. Yeah.
So when Boromir knocks over the shards of Narsil, that's before the Council of Elrond. And so he's not formally introduced to Aragorn, but obviously what he sees in the image is just the image of a man, a warrior fighting evil, right? And he thinks that and he is that, so to speak. He is the ultimate man for the soldiers in Minas Tirith.
Yes.
But Aragorn knows the story better, so he has more reverence for the actual events of the story, and so he kind of knows the power of the sword that is there. Because obviously when Boromir drops it, and because it's still sharp, when he drops it, he just leaves it there, as if it's like a relic of a time gone by. But Aragorn knows its weight, its meaning. But obviously for him, it's kind of it's a view into the weakness of his own character. Right, the weakness that he thinks he bears, because Isildur couldn't give up the ring,
yes.
And he thinks that the same weakness runs in his veins, and he thinks that's why, certainly in the film anyway, that's why he could never be king. In the book, he does want to be king, but in the film, he doesn't want to. Where am I going with this? And then it's Arwen. She comes along, who's another the anima figure again, but obviously for Aragorn. She comes along and tells him he is actually worthy of it, but right now he doesn't want it because he doesn't think he is, because he hasn't had the ultimate test yet. And then obviously we see him and Arwen standing on the bridge talking, as lovers do. And he painstakingly says, "You have to leave because you're not safe here, and I have to go and do this." And he thinks he's going to go and die. So I don't know how much hope he has. Is that? I haven't got to this point in the film yet, because I did start watching it today, but I haven't got to it yet. Does he say something about hope? Like I keep none for myself.
Yes.
Or is that an eternal king?
No. He says to her, like she says to him, like, I give you me, basically. I give you my soul, and it is it's up to me who I choose to give it to, and. It's not. He doesn't ever say to her, like, "There's no hope," until she has a dream, basically, that there is no hope in the third movie. But in this one, it's all like he's just trying to persuade her to go be with her people. But she says, "Take this necklace. This is for you. This is my being, who I am. I want you to have it." And so she gives up everything for him, like you say.
Mm. Yeah, she gave up her immortality, didn't she?
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't read Tale of Beren and Luthien yet, but I do have the book at home. I should read that at some point.
It's fantastic.
Have you read it?
It's fantastic. I've only read a bit, not loads.
Yeah, I've read the chapter in the Silmarillion. It's chapter 20, I think. The only reason I know that is because I actually stopped reading the book. No,
chapter 20.
Literally. The only reason I read the Silmarillion is because I wanted to read that chapter, but obviously I wanted all the context for it.
Yes.
And I got up to chapter 19, which is of Beren and Luthien, and then I just stopped reading it. I didn't pick it up. I didn't pick the book up again for 3 years. It literally took that long.
That's brilliant.
So yeah, that was
But it is,
strange.
that's the type of book it is, though, mate. It is not. It's
Yeah.
more of a collection of stories rather than just one big story.
Yeah.
So it is.
Yeah,
It's almost like
definitely.
the Bible for the Lord of the Rings. It's like it's a collection of, you can't really
It's
read
certainly
it from
written
beginning
that way.
to end. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like you said,
So they're on the road.
They're on the road. We've identified all the characters. Actually, by this point, we now know the main characters. Like we have an understanding of who's who. And this is almost like the middle part of the film. This is the split. And we've had 2 pieces of good so far. We've had 2 pieces of havens and only a very small stretch of darkness. But now we're just going all in, and it's all darkness from here on out, basically.
It is after a little bit, but first we have all the, when they're just walking through Middle Earth, and you have all the amazing scenery of New Zealand and the beautiful mountain backdrops and so on.
Oh, I love it.
And all that amazing music.
Yes.
That just makes it even more powerful.
When they step over the hill into like the sort of bit where the mountain is, and they all nine of them go through that path, and you hear the oh, it's just everyone loves
it's
that.
Fucking sick, isn't it? Yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, I love it.
It was Howard Shore, wasn't it, who composed all that?
Oh, he's a genius, Howard Shore. He's an absolute genius.
I personally think, although I obviously like songs and stuff with people singing that, but I do like instrumental music as well, and I do think the Lord of the Rings music is the most beautiful music that's ever been written.
Well, I listen to it when I'm reading in the morning. So while I'm reading, I'll put it on in the background, because it just sort of, it's this relaxation, but also the sort of build up to the battles as well. You just get hyped sometimes. You just feel like, the rest of the day is going to be positive because of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's sick. So they first try and pass over Caradhras.
Yes.
However you pronounce it.
Yes.
And they're obviously trying to avoid going into, again, from a sort of psychological perspective, they're trying to avoid going into the unconscious.
Yeah.
But then Frodo makes the decision that that's where they're going, so they have to go into the mines of Moria.
Yes.
Before they can do that, they have to pass by this little lake that, unbeknownst to them, has a monster in it that they can't see.
And they've also, just to add to that, it's Saruman's voice, again, the impactive voice, who causes the avalanche to stop them from going over the Ladderless. And it's that pathway that could stop them from going into the Gap of Rohan, and it stops them from going into Moria, and so it leads them along to the water because of Saruman, again, the voice of darkness.
Yeah, definitely carried on the wind. And so they're obviously, again, water being a symbol for the unconscious. They basically, Frodo nearly gets pulled into it by this giant monster, and the only reason he really doesn't is because he's surrounded by these other heroes who they've obviously been through their own trials, they've done their own battles with the unconscious themselves, and they've come out, so they can guide him through. They obviously chop the it's a kraken, isn't it?
Yes.
So they chop the kraken's tentacles off and catch him, and then they have to bundle. They had to run inside basically, but obviously they weren't going to, because they realised as soon as they got inside that it was actually a tomb. It wasn't a place where it's it's bustling dwarven city. But by that point, it's too late. They've already sort of seen the snout of the dragon, so to speak, and the dragon has seen them, and so it's pulled them into the unconscious, and they're now trapped inside.
And they're forced into the long dark.
Yeah, of Moria. Yeah.
Yes.
It's brilliant. And then obviously they're walking through, and in the extended version, you get to see that it wasn't a mine for gold and jewels and stuff. It was a mine for mithril, the precious metal.
Yeah, beautiful.
Really cool.
And it leads on to the tomb of Balin, Lord of Moria.
Sorry, before then.
Oh yeah, the entrance. No, the entrance. You're right. Yeah. Sorry, I totally forgot.
Well, when they're sat at the 3 doorways, where they're trying to work out where to go.
Yes.
Frodo looks back and he sees Gollum.
Yes.
And so if you imagine to skip forward a bit into the 2 towers and to Return of the King. If you imagine that when Frodo is traveling with Sam and Gollum, he's traveling with his own ideal and the opposite of his ideal, whatever that might be, because he can see in Sam what he could be if he successfully destroys the ring, but he also sees in Gollum what he will be if he doesn't destroy the ring. And I think he knows from relatively early on that although he has hope that Gollum can change, and he does actually change a little bit, he has hope that he can change. He hopes that he cannot succumb to it in the same way Gollum, because obviously Gollum is like, well, Gollum isn't, but Smeagol is kind of pathetic. You know, he's driven by Gollum, basically.
Yeah. His
obsession
with the ring.
Yeah, literally. And so to go back to Moria, Frodo's looking back into his own shadow, and he's seeing the. I don't know if there's a term for it, but the opposite of his ideal. And he's like, you know, he says it's a pity that Bilbo didn't kill him, and so on and so forth. But obviously, you can't kill something in your psyche; it just gets driven to the back of your mind. But now Frodo can actually see it, which is a good thing, because it means that, well, at least you're aware of it. Yeah.
And he ends up that I don't know how Gollum does this in the book. I can't remember how, but he follows him all the way until Amon Hem. Like he goes across a river. Like he goes through all of Moria. I don't even know how. You know, you think about it. The 9 of them, they go through like a 4-day journey through Moria, which ends up being extremely chaotic, which we'll get to in a second. But how the hell does Gollum get through there?
Well, he's obviously a very good rock climber. He obviously you know, he doesn't need the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. He just sort of climbs his way around, I suppose.
Well, yeah, Gandalf does make it very clear that there's multiple ways in and out of Moria. So that, to be fair, that probably answers its own sort of question there in the statement. But it, like you say, though, I love the sort of, it's almost a reference to The Hobbit where they have the 3 entrances, because it's almost like a riddle, isn't it? And the front door as well, in the sense of it's actually an adventure again, in the sense that Gandalf's got to remember which path do we take, which is, I like that. It's very sort of a reference to the old sort of storybooks where you'd have, you know, the choice of which way to go down. It's always a little bit of
and obviously in the Knights of the Round Table, in the stories when they search for the Holy Grail, each knight enters the forest, which is where it appears darkest to him.
Yes.
Obviously, I suppose it's a personal perspective there, isn't it? That the Gandalf decides the best way to go is probably where it stinks the least.
Yes.
Because you can imagine that there are definitely going to be orcs in there, because all the dwarves are dead.
Yes.
So something obviously had to kill them. So it's going to be orcs of some kind. So to go where they aren't is probably the better solution.
Yeah, and that eventually leads them to Balin's tomb, which is just, you know, you look inside it. There's dead dwarves everywhere. There's nothing left here, and we start to realise that this is just, it could be the end of the group. Obviously, it isn't, but it stinks of death. And we see Pippin just, you know, foolishly, up to this point, he hasn't really proven himself yet. And then he knocks the skeleton into the hole. Very naive. And it knocks the death of the dwarf into the unconscious and reveals more orcs. And as Boromir says, they have a cave troll.
I had an interesting thought on that. It is a sick battle, that one. I'd look because it's the only battle where the whole Fellowship are there together.
Yes.
Because after this, it's obviously they're disbanded. But I liked the idea of the cave troll, because if Boromir hadn't pointed it out. No, that's the wrong way. That's the wrong way of starting it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the orcs to the Gimli. Are you still there?
Yeah. No. I'm listening intently.
you were totally still, and I didn't know if you mentioned frozen or not. So to the mature warriors, Aragorn, Boromir, Legolas, Gimli, Gandalf, they see the orcs as orcs, right? roughly the same size as them, and so on and so forth. And they're just another warrior to have a battle with.
Yeah.
When the hobbits see the cave troll, it's almost like you're looking through the eyes of a child at an orc.
Mm.
So, and obviously to the child, it's like this big monstrous thing that is so powerful that they can't do anything against it. And this is Frodo's second failure here, because he can't. Obviously, it's a cave troll, so it's not really, you can't really blame him for it.
Yeah.
He can't engage in a fight with the cave troll. And when Aragorn gets knocked out, he is trying to wake Aragorn up, because Aragorn is the only one he knows might be able to save him. Because he can't take on the cave troll himself.
Yes.
And it gets him hurt, because he again loses his sword. Although he does well, because he does try and hurt it, doesn't he? Does he get its fingers or something?
He does hit it twice with his blade. So the blade that he's been given, he does hit the troll twice, and it does. By doing so, he allows Aragorn to get the pike and steer it into the cave troll.
That's it.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's not enough. He's not powerful enough to actually overcome it, and so he gets hurt. He gets stabbed. Skewered with this gigantic spear.
Yes.
And that's when we see we're reminded that Frodo's wearing Mithril.
Yes.
And from a symbolic perspective, the only thing I can really understand from that is that Mithril is like there is a virtue, there is a value in being tough. In being able to take blows and still get back up once they're done. And so it's like this, it's like this pure white. It's hard. So Frodo he is actually tough, certainly tougher than he realizes. And so he, despite the fact that he sort of ran away from the cave troll, which again, understandably, he does actually survive the encounter, because he knows that he needs to be tough now, from a psychological perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And
sense.
he does become a new person after this. So I think you're totally that's going down the right psychological route, because he is a completely different person after Moria.
It's like just another stage in the maturation process, isn't it?
Yes.
It's being hard.
Yeah.
Like you got to get over things.
Yeah, but he's also full of surprises, as pointed out by Gandalf. It's like, oh, wow, we didn't know you would have this ability to survive this great, could have skewered a wild boar. And it's this ability to take the blow that no one thought he would be able to take. So it's interesting to hear you say that.
I actually wrote this down when I last watched it in January. So again, I don't know how much sense it would make, but
yes.
So Mithril is the thing that is good and must be carried forward from the hard men who build, being hard. Which actually that's what the dwarves represent here, because the dwarves are hard men and they build things out of stone. Frodo has a Mithril vest and has been taught to be hard, and it could be that the use of force is important enough to be brought forward from old and dead society. So that's being tough.
Yeah, and it's emphasised by the tomb, because they're definitely dead.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so he didn't die in the tomb, which is where he could have died easily.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like each step further we go into this journey of Moria is a step further into a greater threat. Because we, like you said, from the eyes of the children, we see this massive cave troll. Well, now, we end up out of the tomb and into surrounded by like thousands of goblins and orcs, and you're like, oh, this is the end.
Looking good, is it?
It's happened twice now. We've got two scenarios where we think, oh, this is the end. This is no way we can get out of this. And then it's like evil is only defeated by a greater evil.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like exactly. Well, to me, it's actually a servant of the devil. But to the children, to the hobbits, it might as well be the devil. It might as well be, exactly, because it's a flaming demon. That's
literally
made of
with wings and
flaming
sword and a whip and
The imagery alone for how they describe the Balrog of Morgoth is just perfect. You can't beat it. And as we go to the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, it's this, because Gandalf says, your swords won't do anything here. And it's like, not even the great Aragorn, not even Gandalf can, they're also like, we'll just run. Like, there's nothing we can do against this great evil that is a servant of Morgoth, like so ancient that none of the beings in the nine, of the Fellowship would be able to understand it, apart from Gandalf.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, when he actually turns to face it, it's on the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, which is the only way he knows he would have a fighting chance against it.
Yes.
Because it can only come in one direction. Yeah. But it's also the only time, apart from in Return of the King, it's the only time we ever see him actually use magic to defend anyone.
That's super. Yeah, that's so true. I'd never thought about that, because he uses brute force apart from that, doesn't he? Yeah.
Because I think when they were sent to Middle Earth, they were basically told by the Maya or by the Valar, whoever it was, they were told not to use magic to benefit themselves unless it is like a situation that is unfair, And obviously the Balrog against mortal beings, it would be a pretty unfair one-sided battle, and so that's like one of the few situations he's actually allowed to use it.
Yes.
But he still does lose, effectively.
He does, yeah. And it's the breaking of the Fellowship, the loss of their, the guide to Mordor is lost.
It's a death of God, isn't it?
It's
when God is dead, where do you go? The only place you really go is hell.
Which is true, because that's exactly where Gandalf goes.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, and he even falls into water as well. He falls into water of the unconscious.
And they describe it in, like, I can't remember which book it is, but like the Balrog becomes a slimy being of disgust, because he's no longer a lit. He is now.
Oh yeah.
He's no longer, because he's covered in water. It's like it's a dungeon of frost and water, and so he can't light the flames of the Balrog. So it's very, you're totally down the right line now, I think. And by losing God, we now see Frodo take that next step to maturity, where he's just like, I don't want to be in this group anymore. Like the exiting of a boy band.
Because he knows that he's going to get them all killed eventually.
Yes.
Certainly if there's enough of them. But it's also the moment where Aragorn steps up and becomes the next leader.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Because that's what he's obviously destined to become. But he realizes that everyone sitting around being sad, it's not going to get the job done, and the job needs to be done. And so he stands up, get them up. And obviously Boromir, being maybe a little bit more sympathetic, says, "Give him a moment."
Yes.
But Aragorn says, "No, we're still in mortal danger, basically. So we need to move, and we can lament for our loss when we get to Lothlorien."
Yeah. And it leads from there. We're going from like this dark place of Moria. Like it's just a pit. That's all it is. It's like it's a tomb of blackness. And then it leads to Lothlorien, which is just this beautiful, lots of white light, lots of greenery. Like it's a complete, contrast to what we've seen before. And we're sort of presented with this extra scene, actually, which you probably saw in the extended edition, of Boromir consoling Frodo, which is so strange. Like it's like we actually see the good part of Boromir in this scene.
Definitely.
Which is probably, I understand why they cut it, but
Yeah, it would have been nice to keep it in, because obviously in the theatrical edition, Boromir does seem to come across as a bit of a dick. And obviously in the books he has a lot more lines, and
yes,
and we do get to know his character, and he is a great man.
Yeah.
It's one of the few moments we see in the film where he's actually the right kind of man.
Yeah. Yeah, he says not to dwell on the past as well, and I think that's brilliant. It's like you can't let the death of a friend affect you and stop you from achieving your goals, which is, it's quite. I listened to it. I was like, oh wow, I don't think I've seen this before, and I don't think I've understood how powerful this scene is. And so it does sort of bring into question Boromir's sort of personality up to this point, because he has been shown, like you say, as a dick up to this point.
obviously a great warrior. But
yeah, exactly. But we don't know that, because obviously in the Fellowship you don't ever see him as a warrior. It's not until the Two Towers that we really understand that he is a captain. You know, he is a captain, a king.
Captain of men.
Yeah.
The archetypal man.
Yes.
The ideal.
Yeah. And this is the thing as well. We get to Lothlorien, and it's almost like Galadriel can see into men's hearts. Like she can see into the
she's
mind.
another anima figure.
Yeah.
So they've been thrust into the unconscious, and they managed to get themselves out of it. And on the way out, they encounter an anima figure, who once again breathes life into them. Because they're all damaged this time, and they only really got out because Gandalf kind of sacrificed himself for them. Because if he hadn't destroyed the bridge, obviously the orcs would have just carried on chasing them forever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah,
it's a reference to Jordan Peterson again. It's like the great sacrifice again, where he says that in order for others to live, or for the greater good, one has to make sacrifices that are actually meaningful. And to not be expedient.
Gandalf obviously lives up to that.
Exactly.
And he actually is who everyone thought he was.
Yes, yeah. So. And, you know, when they say, where is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak with him, it's this reminder that, you know, he sacrificed for the group to be there. And they're there, they're present, but they're weary, and Galadriel looks deep into them, and it is revealed. But one thing I've got written here that really, I think sums up Sam as a character is she looks at Sam, she says, yet hope remains, because it's Sam who is the hope within the group, who holds the balance and almost the good that has not been tapped into for a while since we've looked at this part of the film.
Well, he doesn't seem to go through his own hero's journey in these films. It's almost like he already is the person he is supposed to be.
Yes, constantly with good intentions.
Yeah, and the tests and the trials that he has to go through, that everyone has to endure, he accepts them voluntarily, and they don't damage him too much. You know, he's not distraught afterwards, and he's he is already a hero.
Yeah.
It's just that the only thing the journey he's on does, it just proves that's all it does.
Yes.
He doesn't actually have to change his personality.
I totally agree. I see personally, I think that Sam is the constant good in the group, and like you say, it's watching other people go through the journeys, and he doesn't ever question like anyone else. Like he doesn't ever you don't ever see him question the mission they have to go on. He just does it and gets on with it.
Yeah, he just gets on with it, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's crazy. Because I think if I was in that position, I don't know if I'd have the gall to do the same thing. But, you know, that's the difference overall. But we see the burning of the Shire as well, which is a reference to the fact that, you know, Christopher Lee was a bit annoyed when the films were released, and that, you know, Saruman's part was cut down a little bit. And that we didn't see.
Yeah, I agree. I think it worked though. I think it would have been, because by the time the ring is destroyed in the film Return of the King, there's still an hour left.
Yes,
and it's a long hour. You know, like the film is done pretty much.
Yeah.
And in the book, they destroy the ring in like the first third of the book, and so the rest of the book is them basically going home.
Yeah,
and it's a long read.
I quote Jack Nicholson. It just had so many endings.
Yeah,
just
that's good actually. Yeah,
you know, he's spot on there. It's how it is. But we see the burning of the Shire, but it's almost as if for seeing that, he's rewarded. He understands his journey. He understands the consequences. Yeah. And like you said about
he's finally mature, isn't he?
Exactly. Yeah. I think what you said with Gollum as well, he knows what he'll become, but what he didn't know at that point was what could happen to his friends, his family. And he sees that. Yeah. He sees the burning. He sees the end. And so that is the nail in the coffin of Frodo thinking that he has to stay with his fellowship. He's like, nah, that's it. I'm doing this alone.
He's no longer naive. He knows that there's real consequences to his actions, and it isn't just him that will suffer for them if he gets it wrong.
Yes.
So,
yeah. And we see Galadriel in this just like not powerful but beautiful, and we're like, wow, it's just crazy. And it's almost as if it's a different type of, like, if light became so bright that it became like not even evil, but just like a completely different type of evil. So it's very strange. I can't really describe how I felt about that scene.
I was thinking about this. The only way I can really describe it is in the terms of sort of left and right-wing ideology, which sounds strange, but I'll try and run through it quickly. So when we're back in the Shire, when Gandalf is he knows what the ring is, and he's telling Frodo, and Frodo is saying, "Take the ring, please, from me." And Gandalf says, "No, I can't take it, because if I did, I would try and use it to do good. But through me, it would be very, very bad."
Yes.
I think the same thing happened with Galadriel. And so she would attempt to do good things, but in reality, it would be very, very bad things. And maybe getting political probably isn't the right idea for this podcast, but...
Maybe not yet, mate. We're not far enough in.
It just kind of struck me that if you imagine Sauron would like to enslave the whole world to do his bidding, right? Yes. And it's kind of like he would make everyone become fascists. You know, they would all just be they would do what he said, and that's it.
Yeah.
I think it would be the same outcome, but instead of like a fascist kind of dictatorship, it would be like a communist dictatorship where everyone is supposed to do the right thing, but they have to be forced to do it. And I don't know. Maybe I'll leave it there because it's not a very well fleshed out.
No, I know what you're trying to get at. It's like the idea of good. Yeah, good. Perfect. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's it right there. So we'll move on from that without having any political.
But it's interesting though, because obviously she, being a god, she's obviously incredibly powerful, and she struggles to say no to the ring.
Yes.
And obviously in her struggle, she sort of has a fight with herself where she becomes terrible.
Yeah.
But then she remains Galadriel. She managed to quell the desire for it. And so we've had 2 examples, 3 actually. Look, we've actually had 4 examples in the film of the ring being given up. Bilbo first, then Gandalf. Maybe the third one being Bilbo again. Maybe that's not. So maybe 3. So Bilbo giving the ring up in the Shire. Gandalf saying no to Frodo.
Yes.
And then Galadriel saying no to Frodo. Because he says, if you ask it with me, I'll give it to you.
Yes.
Does he say that to her, or does he say that to Aragorn?
No, he says that to her. He says to Galadriel.
Yeah, he says that to her.
Give it to you willingly.
Yeah. And she says no, which is, and so she passes the test.
Yeah.
She is actually who everyone thinks she is. And she's going to remain Galadriel. She's going to remain good.
And it's really interesting to see, because Galadriel, from everyone's perspective, is the white, beautiful being who basically is a safe haven of good, and there's no way she could be corruptible. But the ring being brought into the wood proves that even the greatest good has the potential to be the worst evil, basically.
Absolutely.
I love it. I really enjoyed that.
She acknowledges that. I think she acknowledges that as well, because Carl Jung said that no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots grow to hell. Yes. I think she knows that she could do some real great evil, but she chooses not to. And so
I'm gonna have to remember that one. You're gonna have to remember that one. That one's good.
It's a good quote. That I do like that one.
Yeah. And so Galadriel is this. So say it again. Was it tree that?
No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots grow to hell.
Oh, I like it.
No tree can reach up to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell.
Nice. That's perfect.
So you have to be aware of your shadow, and I think Frodo is now aware of his shadow. I think that's what
you know what the opposite is?
The mirror.
The opposite is Boromir, where he starts to realise, like, he thought he was a really good person. He's starting to think, like, oh no, what if I lose my city? And he starts diving into like self-doubt, and it becomes this great warrior starting to doubt his own abilities. And
He
he's
gets
like,
desperate,
oh,
doesn't
he does, yeah. And he's like, I need the ring in order to be able to basically make up for my lack of ability.
There's actually, I'm reminded of a line in Batman v Superman. It's actually when Alfred says, I think it's in the extended edition, because the theatrical wasn't very good, but the extended edition I thought was very good. Alfred says to Bruce Wayne, he says that Superman basically makes Bruce Wayne feel powerless, and the feeling of powerlessness makes good men turn cruel.
That's it.
And I think that's very apt in that situation.
That's
as well.
that's perfect. Yeah. The inability to do anything against greater power.
Yeah.
Not even evil, just greater power.
Or just a catastrophe that you can see coming that you can't do anything about.
Yeah, and from here we see basically even though Lothlorien is this safe haven, we're basically understanding that this is the end of the Fellowship. We are slowly breaking apart. And then when we get through the great waters, through the kingdom of men to Amon Hen, we see the boat arrive, and it's got this tension in the air, doesn't it? You don't ever see anything, but you feel it, and the music sort of makes us all feel like something's going to happen. And
definitely, the music's really good there actually. It's really clever done. But there's also a bit when they're on the way to Amon Hen.
Yes.
Where they stop at a bank and they're sleeping, and Boromir and Aragorn have a little argument. And Aragorn basically Aragorn says to Boromir that your city is totally corrupt, and I would not take the ring within 100 leagues.
Yes.
Because it's filled with men like you, and they're in a sense they're weak.
Yeah. Which we understand in the third film.
Yeah. But it's almost like Aragorn, he kind of loathes that human element that he has to his psyche, which is the weakness, and he sort of it almost disgusts him a little bit.
Yes, yeah, and I love that scene. I was annoyed that it got cut out in the feature film, to me, it sort of defines. Boromir is so he just doesn't understand. Like he doesn't understand. He truly doesn't understand why Aragorn won't take the ring to Minas Tirith, because all he sees is this good place filled with men that he's fought alongside.
He sees heaven, doesn't he? He sees,
exactly.
Yeah.
But Aragorn sees the truth. He understands that men are corruptible, and it's only because he's been raised outside there, like you said earlier, that we understand that no, we shouldn't. It's funny because you don't really see Minas Tirith until the third movie, and I think that's for good reason. Is that we build up a picture in our head up to this point. We obviously see the outside at the beginning of the film when Gandalf goes there, but that's about it. And so you think this white city, it's going to be a bit beautiful, but Aragorn's painting this picture of just like it's just filled with people you don't really want to be a part of. And it's quite interesting to hear that from him. And this leads on to just this mistrust being built between the Fellowship now, especially with Boromir, of course. And so he's like the representation of man if they want to wield great power, I think. I think if they ever want to wield great power, like, they always say that, power corrupts absolutely, and absolute power corrupts. It's that sense, isn't it? And that very few men can handle that power. And we see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Boromir is corrupted without ever even having taken hold of that power.
Yeah.
It's just the hint of power itself is enough for him to lose it effectively and to lose who he is.
Mate, it's so sad when you see how he goes from like three different emotions. He starts to like try and persuade Frodo. He's like, if we do this, if you just let me borrow it. He's trying to like really bring him into it, and then he becomes angry, and it's like a fiery anger, and then he becomes murderous intent, and then from there he just goes into like this childlike state. He's like, it's like holding himself. It's like, what have I done? Like just completely different emotions. I mean, obviously Sean Bean, fantastic acting there.
Oh yeah, absolutely brilliant. It is a shame he died because he's such a good character.
Just so many emotions, like the range there. It was like the ring. This is what the ring does to men. This is what it's described. It's like it takes it from extreme to extreme, and we don't ever see just this sort of like neutral phase. So basically, it's a description of how evil can affect men, and it's
absolutely, without even realizing, and still with you still thinking that you're actually doing the right thing.
Yeah, and that's why immediately after that scene, Frodo's like, he sees Aragorn, he's like, stay away, back! Like, he's immediately like, men are evil now.
Because he's a man. Yeah, exactly, because he's a man.
Yeah.
And then this is the fourth moment, I think, when in the film where a character is offered the ring.
Yes.
And bearing in mind, all the other characters we've seen, they have had trouble turning it down, right? Obviously, Bilbo's holding it, so he had a slightly harder test, I would say. Gandalf, recoiled in horror, and Galadriel nearly succumbed to becoming an evil witch.
She turned into a witch, but
Aragorn, though, a mortal man, he said no like it was nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like, so that weakness that Isildur has, Aragorn definitely does not have it. He is definitely the right man for the job. So
well, you know what's crazy is that he, in my eyes, is a son of Cain, basically. He's like this guy who's got corruption in his veins, but he chooses not to follow it. And it's like, that's crazy, because doesn't that show to you that men have the choice to choose to be evil and choose to be good?
Definitely.
And I think Aragorn is that representation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the choice, you have to have the recognition of your shadow first. You have to have the recognition of the evil that you can actually do. And I think he knows that, because he knows the weakness, or he at least perceives it to be a weakness anyway. But I think knowing it makes it a strength.
I love it.
Obviously, he doesn't succumb to it. So yeah. And then he passes a test, and then he fights a load of Uruk-hai,
and then he becomes the biggest badass we've ever seen in life. Like, just takes on 20 Uruk-hai like it's nothing, and he's just flinging knives, like slicing people, kicking people downstairs. Like, it's just the best battle sequence.
Yeah.
Like, the guys in New Zealand, they are absolute troopers for taking swords to the face, basically.
Yeah, that would hurt a lot. I've not seen any other films that did that kind of had that kind of choreography.
Well, you know what's funny?
Just being hit full pelt with metal rods.
I don't know if you saw the behind the scenes, but like, apparently John Rhys-Davies, who played Gimli, he would fully hit with his axe every single one of the Uruk-hai stuntmen without any hesitation. And like they say before the filming of the scene, he was like,
can you imagine how much fun that would be as well?
Oh mate, apparently John Rhys-Davies was like laughing afterwards, like, I hit you all, like, just like laughing at the back. I was just like, when I first heard that, that's just brilliant.
Yeah, I like it.
Just a legend. Just these wounded 6'4" like New Zealand men just like limping over because this like short man just hit them in the crotch. Yeah, and I was like, oh, dude. But yeah, fun fact by John Rhys-Davies, legend. And it's a brilliant scene. Like, we see Legolas just go into action, and
that's the first time we really see him doing that, isn't it, with the bow and arrow?
Yeah,
because we don't really see it that much in Balins 2. But then when he's but when they're fighting on Amon-Hen, he's like his bow is like a gun, isn't it? He's just shot.
It's incredible.
It's like a bow action rifle.
Oh mate, it's brilliant. And you see like 2 Uruk-hai get impaled by the same arrow, and we're like, what is going on here? How's that even possible? How do physics work in this world? Like, but I love it. I think that's one of my favourite things is Boromir's horn in the background. Like, you hear the horn, and it's like this, like, urgency. And we see the Uruk-hai, like, they're not all facing Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas, because there's so many of them. And it's this, like, choice, like, the override mission is to get the hobbits, basically. So even though the Uruk-hai are, like, pure evil and, like, they're shadows, they do have the ability to restrain themselves, which is kind of interesting, because the orcs and goblins don't.
Yeah, that is interesting, actually. I never considered that, because I suppose that the only thing they're there for are the halflings, aren't they? And it's just literally just get in and grab them and leave and just run away, because that's all we want. Bring them back to Saruman, and he'll probably torture them.
And it's, I always look at that and think to myself that that's so interesting to see that Saruman basically created soldiers, and it's like actual obedient soldiers this time, because the orcs and the goblins definitely are not. They're like a mob that just happens to follow the strongest leader, basically.
Definitely,
And then from there, so we've seen, you know, Aragorn and Gimli fight, and we've seen that Aragorn has the ability to, you know, not take the ring, and Frodo's running away. We now see Boromir come into action and basically redeem himself. Like, this is the biggest redemption. Like, I love it. It's the perfect, most poetic way for Boromir to go out. But go on, I want to hear your perspective on it more than mine.
Yeah, I was literally just going to say that he obviously knows he failed, and it hurt him a lot. But then he has this opportunity to redeem himself because you can imagine that obviously the detail of the film and the books are that there are 4 different hobbits, but you might as well just call them children, right? And this is a group of children, and he is a grown man, and he's protecting the children from this horde of evil. And you know, he actually is who everyone thinks he is, despite the fact that he kind of had his tests and he failed. But we kind of knew that was going to happen anyway, because he was just an ordinary man. But yeah, he goes down swinging. He's a tough man, and I like it in the Return of the King when Pippin meets Denethor. Denethor is asking, like, you know, how did my son die?
Yes.
And Pippin says, I think Denethor says something like, how did such a great man die protecting you? And Pippin says, a great man may have been felled by one arrow, but Boromir was pierced by many.
Yes.
And it's like whatever he is greater than great. You know, he really is the ultimate archetypal man. You know,
he 100%, and it is like, even though I think this is something recently that I was talking about with family, is that can one action performed by one person define them for their entire being?
I suppose it depends on the gravity of the action.
Yeah, I mean, apart from like murder and rape, obviously, I'm talking about like some, because obviously Boromir failed because he tried to take the ring. But does that action define him for the entirety of his being? And I don't think so. I think what he does next is just like, it restores his honor. And I think that the way he goes out is brilliant. And it's like, Peter Jackson was like, we're not only going to make him look like a hero, we're going to make him look like the greatest captain Gondor's ever seen, like, for history.
Definitely. The toughest son of a bitch ever.
Exactly.
3 arrows to the torso, and he's still fighting on.
And to be fair to him, Lurtz, the Uruk-hai who kills him, is like, he's a tough guy. Like, you see Aragorn fight him, and Aragorn's finding it difficult to fight this guy.
Definitely.
And like, he takes a knife out of his leg and throws it at Aragorn. So, fun fact again, that knife, when he throws it, that's real. Like,
that was a mistake.
That was a mistake. I was like, Jesus Christ, you could have killed him. Like, there's 3 times in these 3 movies where Viggo Mortensen basically nearly goes to death. Like, he nearly dies. Like, this is crazy. So I know
that the second one is when he falls into the river.
Yeah.
What's the third one?
The third one, I'm pretty sure. So he breaks his toe hitting the helmet. Yeah. And then he also
That's why he screams, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And channels it. But he also nearly steps on a mine in Mordor in the third one.
On a mine?
Yeah, because they're filming in an army battleground when they're filming in Mordor. Right. Yeah. That's when New Zealand do their practice.
Oh, fair enough. Because it was in a quarry, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough.
Can you imagine if you nearly stepped on a mine and you're like, oh Jesus, it's all over?
Yeah, that would be the whole project over, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
The whole 2 years filming they had.
Because I'm pretty sure that it's Orlando Bloom who says that they were all like constantly really tiptoeing around on set. In that, but that's for later films. I shouldn't get into that. Spoilers for later on. But
definitely.
Amon Hen, Lurtz throws the knife. It's like perfect choreography for fighting Aragorn, and Aragorn's like, "I'm the king. Here we go." and slices his arm off, and then
Yeah.
even though he's got a sword in his stomach, still has energy in him to try and bite his face off, and so cuts his head off. And it's brilliant. There's nothing archetypical about that apart from just destroying a demon.
Yeah, we're just being a great warrior, being a great swordsman. Yeah, like having actual skill, not just brute force, like what Lurtz was trying to use.
Yes, exactly.
But then obviously when he goes over to talk to Boromir as he's taking his last breaths, he does say, he makes him a promise. He says, "I will not let you set you fall." And you fought bravely and you regained your honor, and that was it was a nice thing to do. His last breath, because obviously Boromir, even though he had done immensely well, he still felt like he'd failed, and he was dying because he failed. But it's like, no, the cards were just stacked against you no matter what.
Yes.
And if maybe if Lurtz hadn't had the bow and arrow, maybe he would have survived. But who knows? But that was the hand he was dealt, and the children got taken away, and that was that. But he fought bravely, and he regained his honor.
And I think all three of the characters there, they're all quite silent and solemn to represent their joined unity in saying that, like, look here, Boromir, you've done the right thing. Like, this was the right thing. Like, you couldn't have done it any other way. And I think that silence sort of says it all.
He died being actually who he was. He actually was a warrior. He was a great man. He actually died, and he died as that. He didn't die as a coward.
Well, that's why he says, "My captain, my king." Like, I would have followed you to the very end. And it's this sort of, yes, you would have. We believe you now. Like, these aren't empty words. We understand this. Like, this is it. Yeah. I love that. Definitely. Yeah. Again.
And then obviously, there's the little, I don't know, 3-second shot of Aragorn standing up, and he has the sunlight shining through the trees, and it's on his face.
Yes.
I don't know if that really means anything, but I think it's quite a powerful little shot.
It's a positive omen for him, isn't it, as a character, more than anything else, and that he's just defeated a great enemy, and so the sun shines on him for a new day, basically. And sadly, now this is where the Fellowship's just completely shattered. But the two children, Merry and Pippin, the two hobbits are taken. We've lost Boromir, we've lost Gandalf, and now Frodo's basically in the boat. Like, see you guys later. Like, goodbye. And then we have Sam chasing after him, and it's Sam's consistent sort of want to help Frodo is what...
it's his consistent character, isn't it?
I
had some thoughts on this one as well. So I think that Sam views Frodo as his own ideal, because he thinks Frodo is like a really great hobbit.
Yes.
Which I really like, because Sam is a great hobbit.
He just doesn't know it.
Yeah, and Frodo took, he took a few trials to go through before he kind of became, a great hobbit, or before he matured.
Yeah.
And when Sam is trying to get into the boat, and he's in the river and he's drowning, he's in the unconscious, in the water of the unconscious.
Yes.
And then his ideal reaches in and pulls him out.
Yes.
Which I quite liked. I thought that was...
Yeah, he's saved by his own views. And you can't ask more from that from a character, really.
No, yeah, definitely. He obviously had the right... He had the right model.
But I think it's also that he was willing to sacrifice himself in the water in order to, obtain his ideal. And he was willing to sacrifice everything in order to keep to his word that he promised Gandalf that he would look after him and follow Frodo to the end. And so we see that, and we're like, right, Sam solidified as the hero of this story. Let's move forward with this. Like, definitely. I think there's only a couple of times in my life that I truly cried at movies, and that's in the second movie when Sam makes his speech. And I think it's he is one of the very few characters that I think most men should ever be able to relate to the ability to constantly try to seek good, even in a world where there is bad. So there is
definitely ever the optimist.
Exactly, ever the optimist, even in a world that is falling apart, especially in our world right now.
Oh mate, yeah. We won't go into that though, because that could be on another podcast.
No, exactly.
Yeah,
so
let's end it
on a high, mate. We've talked about all of this, we've seen so much good in characters as they've developed. We've lost a few. We've talked about the archetypal story, and I would love it if you come back on the podcast and we do part 2 for the Two Towers.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That's brilliant. Right, we'll end it here. Thank you,
How long have we
Ollie,
done?
so much. I don't know how long. I'm pretty sure it's around 2 hours, 2.5 hours, along those lines.
Nice.
So it's high quality stuff. But Ollie Deacon, you're an absolute legend, mate.
Thanks for having me on, mate. I appreciate it. It's been good to talk to you again.
Legend. So, guys, this has been Chris's Corner, a Taylor's Tales podcast. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and we'll see you next week.